welcome to today's lesson on how important is clean drinking water, when we're going to talk about how we manage our freshwater resources. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to explain the importance of freshwater management, so why it's important to avoid pollution and advocate for clean water, and you'll be able to identify how much fresh water is actually available to us. So at the very beginning here, before I get into everything, I'm going to ask you a question. How much of the world's water do you think is drinkable? If I said 50%, if I said 20%, if I said 10%, which one do you think it would be? Well, that's the kind of question we're going to answer, and I think the answer will surprise you. So the importance of water. We all know that all living things need water to live. We as people are made of water. We need to drink water. Animals have water in them. It's an important thing. It also helps control our climate. As water gets polluted and as water becomes less available, climate changes, weather changes. These are all important things. It also shapes the Earth's surface. Erosion and deposition, the movement of soil and land. Water is always reshaping our world, and that's a really important thing. Water is an important part of every aspect of our life. And it also dilutes and degrades wastes. Later in this unit, we'll talk about waste management systems, and water is a key element in achieving that. So how much water is there on Earth? Some of you may have said 50%, some of you may have said 20%, some of you may have said 10%. Some of you may have other numbers, but we're going to look at that now. So we know that 97% of the world is covered in water, but 97.6% of the water available to us is salt water. So this whole pie right here, none of this water is available to us. It's all salt water. So of the water available to us, 2.4% of the water on Earth is drinkable. So that's all the water we have out of all the water on Earth. But here's the catch. Of that 2.4%, it's not all available to us, because 87% of that water is frozen in ice and snow. We cannot drink it. So only 13% of that water is liquid water. So that's even less. So of this 2.4%, we see less than a quarter of it. So barely any of that water we actually see. Now, moving on to this diagram here, of that water available to us, 95% of that water is in the ground. Diagram, 95% of that water is trapped in the ground, traveling in underground streams and aquifers. We have access to it if we can drill wells, but if you're not able to, that water is not available to you. And then of that remaining amount, soil moisture, just the moisture that's in dirt, and 2%, and lakes and rivers and streams are 3%. So of this big pie in the very beginning, we can only have access to a small portion of that water. So we also know that fresh water is distributed unevenly. Not all places in the world have the same access to that water. So of that 2.4%, where do you think the ice and snow is mostly? And it's predicted by 2025, 1/3 of the human population will live in areas lacking access to fresh water. So 1/3 of the 7 billion people on Earth won't have access to the same water we do. And now if we look at it, this chart here is really interesting, because it breaks down all the major areas of the world, and for the people living there, how much water is available to them. So 36% of the world's water, or fresh water, is in Asia. But 60.5% of the population is also in Asia. So it's not an even amount of water per person. And if we keep looking down, look at the areas where there's more water than people. If you see North America, South America, and Oceania, you'd be correct. Oceania is like Antarctica. Not many people live there. There's lots of water frozen in the ice. But North America and South America have the most water for its population. So that makes up about 7 countries having about 60% of the water available. In Canada, we're very fortunate because a lot of the world's water is actually right here. But those are the only places. The rest of the world doesn't have the same access to fresh water. So here's your first shout out. How much of the Earth's water is available to us to drink? And I'm not going to bother you with the smaller amount, like the smallest amount. Just how much out of the total water in the Earth can we actually drink? Whether it's frozen in the ground, doesn't matter. Just how much is available to us. If you said 2.5%, you'd be correct. In your next shout out, which continents have the most fresh water for their populations? If you said North and South America, you'd be correct. There is more water than there is people. But this is a big issue because many countries in the world, such as the Middle East, which has one of the highest populations, has one of the greatest water shortages. So here's your homework. I want you to submit this on Edmodo online. How much fresh water is available to us? Let's think back to that graphic and how much of the entire water on the Earth is fresh and available to us. And why is it important to manage our fresh water? Think back to everything I talked about. Why is it important that we protect it and make sure that pollution doesn't get into it? And that concludes our video.